Good evening, New Orleans, and happy holidays, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to concentrate heavy on the New Orleans Saints. And joining me on the program, the Saints columnist for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, none other than Mr. Larry Holder joins us tonight. Larry, welcome to the show. As always, appreciate you coming down and joining us here on the show, and appreciate you doing a little solo gig tonight.
Look, you know me. I'm kind of a me kind of a guy, so I like this whole area for me.
A little more elbow room.
Oh, I love it. A little more elbow.
Camera.
And we're going to be going back and forth.
Yes,
and look,
I
even told you today, the hair was ready to go.
Yes.
But now it's falling a little bit.
Well, it went from Mad Men to now Frat Boy.
Right.
But I got to tell you, Larry, either look is a good look on you.
I know.
Either look is a good look on you.
You know, hair's my thing. We've been going over that for years.
I know it is. 866-3200 is the phone number if you'd like to get involved tonight. Talk a little Saints with Larry Holder. Of course, Larry's in the locker room each and every day, and we'll be able to try to hopefully dissect what's going on with your New Orleans Saints. 6-8. I don't think any of us thought they'd be 6-8 at this point. Coming off a win against just a dog of a team, the Chicago Bears, who just, they didn't even give an effort last week on Monday night. Just your overall thoughts on this season as a whole before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Like you said it, and I fell trapped, and I probably brought a lot of Saints fans with me saying that I thought this would be the best roster they've ever had on paper.
I did too.
And I got sucked in, and boy, obviously they're not. And yet you see at times, and look, they beat up on Chicago, and you should have beat up on Chicago, even though I picked the Bears because I say my pick is worthless. Every week it's worthless. I call it in my first and 10 column instead of the pick where I just, look, a lot of optimism, this and that, I just call it the worthless pick.
Yes.
Yeah, or I call it fearless pick.
Fearless.
Used to, now it's worthless.
Now
but, look, they have, when they're on, they're on.
Right.
You just look at what they did against Green Bay. You look at what they did against Pittsburgh. You really look at what they did against Detroit, even though they lost that game. You look at what they did in Carolina, and all these games I'm talking about are on the road, except for Green Bay.
Yeah.
And you go and beat up a Chicago team that you should have beat up, and they did. And yet you can have the Carolina games, obviously the big stinkers. Right. Cincinnati's got to be 1A, and not the same team. And I think there's a lot of different levels to this. I think there's got to be, and at least it seems like they fixed it somewhat, patched it up. We'll call it for the Chicago game. We'll see how they go going forward. But
yes.
I think somewhere along the line, coach to coach, coach to player, player to player, there's some sort of disconnect somewhere along the line. It might not be as big in each realm, but when you're playing as inconsistently as they have been, there's something missing there. And it's not that they don't recognize that in the Saints organization. I don't think they know for certainty how to fix it, and I don't know if you can fix it completely this year. You just kind of now you're kind of living on a prayer.
Yeah.
You win a division, get in the playoffs, and hope something great happens.
Larry, you've been in a lot of locker rooms. What's the difference in this locker room? We hear the lack of leadership. We've heard immaturity, lack of professionalism. It's been blamed, especially on the defensive side of the ball, with the loss of so many veteran guys who really knew the Peyton way and knew the program and understood what it meant to win, understood what it took to overcome adversity. We've seen, especially the one big position group where again has really underachieved is that defensive line, where you really don't have that veteran presence in those meeting rooms. As you're there day to day, as you look back on your time covering this team, what's different in this locker room this year as opposed to previous years?
I really think it starts, well, obviously players-wise, I think you've got probably a less mature group, and players who were coming into success with the Saints rather than starting from the ground floor, say a Scott Shanley, a Scott Fajita, or Roman Harper. I can rattle off the names: Will Smith, Jonathan Vilma, and then you brought in along the way a Jabari Greer, and you brought in along the way a Malcolm Jenkins, and they built it to win. And a lot of these other players came into a winning situation. And and I'm just going to throw out there, because he's the hot name right now for being benched, whatever you want to call it, is Kenny Vaccaro. Came into a winning situation and really had the leadership around him, and was growing as a player. You get rid of those guys, you put more on his shoulders. Doesn't seem like he was completely ready for that. And I think he'll actually admit that. And yet, you look at some of the things he's done on the field, not necessarily off the field, but just lacking some wherewithal. Now, off the field, we've certainly seen some problems. Hot topic last week or 2 weeks ago, Junior Gillette basically putting lighter fluid and lighting a match to everything that's built the success in the defense. And he was certainly called to the carpet by the team, by the brass. And we're talking a lot of this on defense because I think that's really where it is.
Yeah, that's where the void is, honestly, in leadership. You know, I'll take it a step further, Larry. One thing you look at in the Payton era is the fact that they got a lot of guys who were cast-offs. Guys who were told, you can't play in this league.
Right.
Okay? And those guys use that as a motivation tool. And if you look at the core of this team early, you know, it was guys like Vilma. You know, it was guys like Shanley, like Fujita, some of those other guys that felt, you know, then you can throw a myriad of defensive linemen who were cast-offs that then again lent themselves to becoming winners and ultimately winning that Super Bowl in 09. They don't have a lot of those guys right now on the defensive side of the balls, guys that have had a little sand kicked in their face and said, you can't play in this league.
No, and I think it goes back to a lot of these guys. Let's see, say Junior Gillette. He came in 2010. They just won a Super Bowl. And you say 2011, Cam Jordan, who first-round pick. He gets there, walks right into a successful team. And you've seen really how they have not really dealt with a lot of adversity. Now, some of these guys we're talking about, they did in 12. And yet when Sean Payton got back, they kind of righted the ship a little bit, got a jolt from Rob Ryan. But to me, you look at the difference in, and it makes me, I'm 34 years old, it's going to make me sound like I'm 50, 60.
Like, make it sound like you're my age, 54.
Ancient, right. Back in my day, you know, I think Sean Payton's message went better with a different generation of player. And you look at, if there's, say, an 8, 9, 10-year difference between, say, a Will Smith and then, say, a young guy, I'm just going to say Akeem Hicks. I'm not necessarily saying he's a problem child, but when you have that far of a gap, you come up playing differently. You come up with a different mentality. You walk into an NFL locker room now, it's certainly a different place than it was 10 years ago. And so I think Payton's message resonated more with, well, it's not old school, but the generation before, and I think Payton needs to figure out what message works for this new generation, because he's dealt with such a core group for so long that he's got to almost reinvent himself. And you see that when they start talking about coaches, you know, staying too long, you know, I've stayed there, welcome. Payton's in his ninth year within the New Orleans organization, and I think part of that is the problem. Part of it's the players, but I think Payton's got to figure it out with what players work for him, what players are going to listen to the message, heed the message, because that older core he's so used to. We saw the mass exodus last year. There's only a handful left. If Payton's going to stay with this team and be successful, he's got to figure it out as well. You know,
it's interesting you say that because it is a different NFL locker room. You know, again,
absolutely.
You even look 4 years ago, you could walk in that locker room. Guys weren't tweeting. They weren't reading tweets. They weren't doing their Instagram. They weren't on Facebook. It used to be in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, a lot of guys didn't even look at a newspaper or watch a newscast or listen to a talk radio
show. Well, at least they told you that, but now it's more readily available.
Right. But now it's on their smartphone. Absolutely. They're engaged. They see what people are saying about them, fans and media alike. On the flip side, you talk about the changing. Payton said recently after one of the games, the program's not going to change. The players are going to have to change. And then I look to Bill Belichick, who's been able to have longevity and has been able to have a program in which, again, he can consistently win. I wonder if Sean Payton will change. I wonder if he's up for the change. You're there every day. What do you think?
I think he knows he has to change, and yet I know there's this speculation that came about. And I asked him about it last week, and I just called it an idea because he likes, that report. I'm like, no, it's just an idea. Peter King saying Sean Payton might pull a Bill Parcells and duck out early.
You don't buy that, do you?
No, I wrote that day. I said that's
Neither do I.
Ludicrous. I don't. Sean Payton is one of the most intense, dedicated football guys I've seen, and yet he does need to change. He needs to tinker with something. And Bill Parcells, look, he did it in multiple stops, so he basically had to reinvent himself.
He did.
And here's the thing: I'm sure I'm not around Bill Belichick all the time, if ever, and I'm sure he has to reinvent some of the things that he's doing. And for Sean Payton to be successful and to have kind of that next lift, he's going to have to do that. Now, of course, Bill Belichick still does have Tom Brady, so that certainly helps.
But Peyton still has Drew Brees.
I understand that, yet Tom Brady has had more success than Drew Brees. Look, Tom Brady's got 3 rings, been to 5 Super Bowls, and I still think Tom Brady, he's probably playing at a higher level than Drew is. Look, I think Drew has bounced back recently for sure.
Yes.
And he's still playing at a Pro Bowl caliber level. But he doesn't have as many voices around him as he used to. And again, you look at the landscape of the rest of the locker room, he is by far the old guard. And even he maybe needs to relate to, say, Kenny Stills. Again, I'm not saying that Kenny Stills is a problem child, but I'm just using him as an example because he's young. He's 22, 12, 13 years younger than Drew.
One thing we did see last week was something that I think a lot of us were waiting for, that have seen Peyton, his history here in New Orleans, which was the wrath of Peyton. We saw him more animated on the sidelines, again, especially against Carolina. And then, of course, the gauntlet was dropped, and we saw, again, the situation with Joe Morgan being cut. The report of at least 10 players being called into the Peyton's office. Also, obviously, Corey White being benched. I want to ask you about the situation with White as well. Powell didn't play last week. Ronald Powell, was that an injury, or was that one of those coming to the office moments for him? Because he didn't play, and I went back and looked. I didn't think he was on the injury list. So obviously Peyton tried to tinker with the lineup some in terms of sending a message. It looked like it resonated with the players, but I don't know if we can say it'll resonate week to week and sustain until we see it with our very eyes, because Chicago was a bad team that quit.
Right. But yet we've seen the Saints play bad against some bad teams this year.
True.
And I'd say do it at home. I mean, look, they just about blew it against Tampa. They were a suplex away from maybe giving Minnesota another shot earlier in the season. But, and here's the thing, we talked a lot, you just brought up a lot of different scenarios. And let's start with, say, Joe Morgan. That was coming. He was under the last year of his contract. He is by far was on the hot seat. And when he's getting chewed out by Drew Brees and Sean Payton after being given chance after chance after chance, and you're a role player who you only know one route, it's go deep.
Right.
Yeah, see you later. No need for you. All right.
Larry, was it more off the field or on the field with Joe Morgan, or a combination of both?
I think it has to be a combination of both. Joe Morgan, I know he said in a statement, oh, they said it had nothing to do with off the field. Yeah, right. You don't get suspended for 2 games.
Right.
A season later, after you already had a DWI,
Yes.
for running wrong routes. Give me a break.
Yes.
So yeah, I think altogether it didn't work out. And again, we're talking about a 4th or 5th wide receiver. I know people think he could have been some huge explosive guy, but and also you look at the receiving core. It's kind of totally off base where we're talking about. But Saints certainly miss Brandon Cooks. I think there's no question about it. But he's not a problem. Now let's go to with some of the things they did secondary wise. I would not be surprised this week if Corey White is back and playing a significant role. And that's more, it's kind of twofold. Catherine Terrell, my colleague, actually caught up with Corey White earlier today, said they basically sat him down a week because they were moving him to safety. And Jamarcus Sanford was maybe kind of a buffer zone there to get him acclimated for a week. And so you're going to have, and now Sanford's actually hurt. He's missed the last 2 days. And so I think Corey White may shift back in, but not as a cornerback. And
so maybe White's situation wasn't being maybe a problem in the locker room. It was more of a shift from position to position.
Well, I think they're shifting him because he's not very good at quarterback.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest there. But they're trying to figure out a role for him just because with the injuries and everything
Yeah,
that's
you
going
can't pull
down.
another guy off the street.
Right, exactly. And now Terrence Frederick has taken over that starting job.
Who
and
played every snap last week, right?
played every snap. Him and Pierre Warren were the only two defensive players to play every
Two
snap.
guys that were on practice squads.
Right.
Okay. And I want to get into Pierre Warren a little bit later because I want to ask you about him at the at training camp. But continue your thoughts on just the changes that happened last week and how they may impact going forward.
Right. And Kenny Vaccaro, the Saints were very adamant not being benched. Well, maybe in someone else's terms, if you're not starting, guess what? You're coming off the bench. Yet Kenny Vaccaro played like 70% of the snaps.
Yes.
But that also went into account because Sanford got hurt in that game. And so Kenny Vaccaro was good. He was being more of a hybrid guy, played a lot in the slot, which they were trying to move him around, not have him kind of stuck in that safety spot, which they wanted to do originally. Obviously, they don't feel like it worked out. They'd rather be him be a hybrid, and we'll see what happens, how it progresses. Now, he said he felt, I talked to him yesterday, and he says it felt kind of like his old self again a little bit. And his play, it wasn't like he made all these outstanding plays, but he certainly didn't make the screw-ups he's been making.
Agreed.
So, again, 1 weekend, let's see how he shifts over. So, but now you have the Sanford injury. This Kenny Vaccaro moved back into that strong safety spot. Corey White come in and play kind of that third safety role and have Pierre Warren as your free safety. Look, it's a lot of moving parts.
It is.
And the last thing you want to be doing right now is moving all these parts, and yet the secondary was a major problem. We saw it against Carolina. You couldn't stop Carolina, you're in trouble. And they needed to do something. And for 1 week, it's worked. They're in the lead for the NFC South, and they can't turn back because if they start putting Corey White back in and this and that and reversing course, I think you're totally doomed because we've seen it doesn't work.
866-3200. Larry Holder's our guest, Saints columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. Let's head to Ryan in Mid-City. Ryan, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yeah, how you doing,
Hey, Ryan.
Eric? To your guest, I'd like to say I think Sean Payton did an amazing job of sitting Corey White down. These guys are awful, and I just don't know why did it take so long to sit this guy down? You know what I'm saying? And this guy can't tackle, he can't cover. I watched number 42 chase down balls the other night. What people supposed to do, what the secondary is supposed to do. And I got one more thing to say. I'm still mad with the LSU senior kicker. I'm still upset about that, and it just was a shame, you know. And I just thank y'all. I'll keep watching.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the phone call.
Now, look, a lot of fans have some venom against Corey White, and I understand the venom. I said maybe, 2 months ago, let's sit him down, put Patrick Robinson back in, throw in Brian Dixon, do something because what he was doing didn't work. It took a little while. But I guess you have to get deep enough into really just having I've seen enough moment like what happened literally a year ago when he parked Charles Brown. But like I said, look, I really suspect Corey White's going to get back in the lineup into some different role to where he's not a cover guy. Maybe he's more comfortable with that. But with the bodies you have, I mean, you're almost stuck doing that because you're already, 3 safeties down with Jarris Byrd, Raphael Bush, and even Vinny Cincinnati out for the year.
Larry, we heard from the players last week. Practice was much tougher. There was more of an attention to detail. One of the things we've been accustomed to in a Payton-led team is they don't hurt themselves. They're disciplined. There is attention to detail. They're not killing themselves with penalties. You don't have missed assignments. Those are the things that are just kind of a hallmark of a Payton team. It's a little bit tougher to have a hard practice on a short week. With that said, will we see them be able to sustain that wrath of Payton, that energy we saw last week, that sense of urgency that we finally saw of this team?
I wish I could give you a concrete answer, but I have no idea because they've been so inconsistent. For me to say, will they sustain? I'm putting myself on a major limb because that sucker could snap in a millisecond. But
I'm with you.
I could tell you, they've actually they haven't had as much practice time this week. They scaled back yesterday, did kind of a walkthrough, and I think they're the practice reps for some guys are increased probably for these younger guys, and yet for the veteran guys, they're trying to scale them back
Yes.
just because you're in the stretch run. And so, but as far as can they carry it over, I have no idea, honestly. And I say that not because I don't have a good answer for you, because I really have no idea. I don't know if they have a good idea. They just are going to do what they can try to do, mixing it up. I think that helped, and I think the mix-up, they saw it worked, so maybe that's going to help them buy in. Now, how long can they sustain this?
Yes.
Can they sustain this for another week and clinch, for 2 weeks maybe and get into playoffs and get into postseason? If I knew that, I'd be off to Vegas,
you and me both.
mortgaging the house and just throwing it down and winning gabillions.
That's right. We'd be right.
But
We'd
there's
be-
no chance that I'm going to attempt to put a penny on anybody.
Well, and it's true, because again, it's been a schizophrenic team all season long. All season. Don't know what the personality is going to be. Let's go to Hammond and Brian. Brian, welcome. You're an Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for calling.
Hey guys, look, one of the things I've noticed throughout the season is, the defense obviously not playing up to par, but one of the big things, it seems like watching other defenses, it seems like our defense is always out of position, never quite sure, maybe over pursuant of the ball, and then everybody's having to chase to make the tackles. And then obviously, as the years going on with the defense being injured, our defense, our secondary is pretty washed out. I guess my question is, do you see that when you look at the other games around the league? Do you see our defense maybe not being in the right positions, or maybe not being in the right right coverages in some instances?
Brian, thank you for the phone call. I'll say that all season long, they have not been gap disciplined. Guys have been out of position, chasing. I don't know if that's a byproduct, Larry, of not trusting the guy next to you, of knowing that he's going to do his assignment. So maybe you got to lean a little bit the other way and kind of have your position and the other guys with the other guy's assignment as well. I will say this: the team that the Saints are playing this weekend, Atlanta, they look a lot like the Saints defense. I mean, when you look at Atlanta play, there's not a lot of difference between the Saints defense and Atlanta's defense. They're having the same type of problems. What's your take on this?
Well, I think Saints fans actually should be thrilled, because Atlanta is the only defense that's worse than the Saints in total defense right now. And that is certainly part of it. I think being unsure of where they're going to be. We saw that very early with secondary problems, and Patrick Robinson was yanked in the Cleveland game, and he had to come back in, and that bit him again. So I think that's part of the problem. But, I mean, Sean Payton, you saw it all come together in an awful way for a Saints fan and for the team against Carolina. Everything, nothing with gap sound, bad technique, being bullied off the line defensively. You look at guys over pursuing. That's part of the problem with Kenny Vaccaro. He over pursues and gets sucked in. That's why you have a Jonathan Stewart 69-yard run. That's why you had Greg Olsen wide open, and Kenny Vaccaro says, "Oh no," and has to turn right back around and sprint, and no chance. It's everything. You can name something, and you would be right. Any negative aspect. No pass rush. Why is that? Because bad technique, or coverage is bad, or any of this you can pinpoint. And to me, it's I'm sure we can talk about this all day long. It's why Rob Ryan's future is certainly a question mark, and has to be a question mark, because for all of it to break down with a lot of the same guys, you're wondering what's going on. But of course, that's the thing. Last year, you saw a lot of that work. So it's obviously not all on Rob Ryan. The players certainly want to be accountable, and yet you ask either end, Rob Ryan says, "Oh, it's on coaching." Players say, "Oh, it's on the players." And it's funny, because you have to try to sift through some of this if you're wondering what's going to happen with Rob Ryan. Because think back in 2012, a lot of people were being politically correct about Steve Spagnuolo. Once he was out, everyone's trashed him.
They were calling you on the phone.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I remember.
Right after the season. And it was, people saying the right things, and yet he was gone. People were happy for him being gone. So it's a tricky situation. We'll see what happens.
With Peyton not wanting to jettison his guys, his coaches, is there a possibility that Ryan is the scapegoat here and maybe Dennis Allen is the next defensive coordinator?
Well, if we've seen in the past, how does it work? Let's see. When they hired Greg Williams, who was there? Bill Johnson, Joe Vitt, Dennis Allen was there.
Yes.
When they hired Steve Spagnuolo, Dennis Allen was gone, but who was still there? Joe Vitt, Bill Johnson, of course, linebacker, defensive line coach. When they hired Rob Ryan, who's still there? Joe Vitt, Bill Johnson, Peyton may. That's the thing. If you're going to get rid of Rob Ryan, and again, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Right.
And it's certainly something to where you have to consider, and yet Peyton would be on his 4th defensive coordinator in 5 years. But the only name you're circling is Dennis Allen because you know that guy.
Yes.
Because also, here's another thing. If you are a good defensive coordinator or a defensive guy and you see, all right, Greg Williams out after 11, Spagnuolo out after 12, Rob Ryan out after 14, you have no job security. So who in their right mind would want to go down there if they don't think they're going to be secure?
Unless you've been here before and you were one of Peyton's guys, who Dennis Allen was.
And is.
And is.
He's certainly
And is.
absolutely
And is. And that's why I think at the end of the season, even though I don't think it's fair to Rob Ryan because of the injuries, especially the secondary, and I do put it on Mickey Loomis by not addressing the corner position once Jabari Greer went down.
that second cornerback position,
Yes.
they failed from the start.
They did, from the start.
Absolutely from the start. It's never been the same.
And it's been a
since
ripple
Jabari
effect.
Greer was hurt. Never
Right.
been the same.
Right. Been a ripple effect since then.
Absolutely.
Okay? No doubt. But the biggest disappointment on this team, bar none, is the defensive line.
Oh, no question.
You can talk about all you want about the secondary being injured, and of course now it has been, I mean, you're pulling guys off practice squads in the street, but you got Broderick Bunkley is the only injury that you've really had on that defensive line. These guys are young. There's no reason why these guys shouldn't be competing and playing as well as they did last year. That's where the Saints' troubles have started. I've said and mused that maybe this is a situation where you just don't have a real loud veteran presence, a leadership in that meeting room. That's again, you look at every other position group, and you've got at least a veteran presence in those meeting rooms. You don't really have one in that defensive line.
No, you don't. And you wonder, all right, well, Junior Gillette got paid. Cam Jordan didn't. Cam Jordan's been a no-show in some games. You're wondering, well, is he a little jealous of what's going on? And yet, you look at Junior Gillette. Has the money gotten to him? It's hard to say with either of them because, look, Junior Gillette, it's not like he's known for his run defense. He's known more as a pass rusher.
Yes.
He does have 9 sacks, so at least he is in that category, which is important. And Pro Football Focus is a site I use all the time. Going into this past week, he was number 2 among all defensive ends in the entire NFL in pass hurries.
Yes.
Look, he can still get to the quarterback. Now, he's a liability against the
Yes.
run, for sure.
Yes.
But then you look at Cam Jordan, he hasn't been the same in either facet. And then we all thought Akeem Hicks was going to elevate, be tough against the run, use that motor and strength. I mean, because he's a strong,
Yes, he
strong player. And yet, you look at some of the bad alignments and things, and he will have his back turned, and a runner's going to run behind, like right past
You're
him as
taking the
his
words
back's
right out of my
turned.
mouth. It's constant. He is being turned, and they're running right off his backside.
It happens far too often. Did not happen as much. But here's also another thing: teams are paying a lot more attention to him this year than they were last year
Yes.
because of how they played. And yet, you still got to be able to play.
But that should open up guys like Jordan and Gillette. Another problem in the running game, again, teams run right at Junior Gillette. I said it last week on this program. I've been screaming it on my radio show. I don't know if this is a good deal now when you look back at $41 million, $23 million guaranteed, and an average of $10 million a year for what has become now pretty evident, a situational pass rusher in Junior Gillette. You know, you almost now have to go out and get a guy that can play the run and the pass, and then again be able to take a Junior Gillette now and move him around the field and utilize his ability to be able to rush the passer passer from different sides of the ball. He didn't get better against the run. You add that to the fact that Hawthorne is slowing down, and you put him on the edge, and all of a sudden you got guys that are chasing, and that's why we're seeing the big just gashes against the Saints when they run right at Gillette or they run right at that side.
Well, part of it may be that he's nursing a knee injury. His
Talking about Hawthorne?
No, I'm talking about Gillette.
Mm-hmm.
His snaps were essentially cut in half this past week, and he was only in pass rushing situations. And what do you know? 2 sacks. And they didn't run the ball all that much, but they were still effective with it. And they were playing actually. And we kind of had a debate about this in the media room. What do you consider a 4-3? What do you consider a 3-4? I think a lot of it depends on what you consider Gillette.
Yes.
Whenever I see Gillette on the field, and then you have, say, Jordan, Hicks, someone else, that's 4-3. I consider him a defensive end. But you saw a lot more this week. You saw Ramon Humber, Hawthorne, Lofton, and Paris Harrelson in. And then when it's a pass situation, you're going to take out Harrelson, put in Gillette, who's more the pass rusher. So I think they're trying to compensate for that, and it certainly worked against Chicago.
And Hawthorne more in the box instead of having him on the edge.
Hawthorne played the game of his life.
3 sacks.
He played the game of his life this past week.
And again, a lot of that was you saw him blitzing up the middle in the gap. But when he was inside and you kept him in the box, he was effective. Where he hasn't been effective is when he's lost a step. Is when he's got to be able to take that receiver or that running back, or if you got to drop him in the zone coverage. Another thing that just boggles my mind, dropping Cam Jordan and Junior Gillette in the pass coverage. I understand you're trying, and if you can get to the quarterback, it works. Most of the time, it has not this season.
Well, a few weeks ago, I remember doing in one of my film studies, I see Junior Gillette 20-some-odd yards downfield chasing a wide receiver. And I literally wrote in my film study, what on earth is Junior Gillette doing out there? Well, he didn't freelance. That was part of the defense.
Part of the defense.
So why on earth are you doing that?
No,
I have no idea. But it's, Hawthorne, when you had Humber on the field and you had Lofton, Hawthorne had different assignments, and it certainly worked well. Look, best overall game I've ever seen him play in a Saints uniform. Was good in pass rush. Was actually good in stopping the run, and his cover skills are below average, and yet he still did better in that facet. By far the best game I've ever seen him in.
I 100% agree, and I thought a lot of it had to do with alignment, how they utilized him.
And that's because you had different personnel. You were playing with 4 linebackers more often than you were, and even 3 linebackers when you take Hawthorne off the field. I mean, not Hawthorne, when you take Harrelson off the field and left Humber, Lofton, and Hawthorne in there.
Got to take a break, but another guy that really has been a guy that you got to wonder what happened to him is John Jenkins. I mean, great game last week. Where's it been all year long? And that's a big problem when you're counting on him to be able to step up in another year. He just hasn't done it consistently this season. 866-3200. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night with our live broadcast right here on WLAE TV, 6 p.m. You can catch us on Friday nights here on WLAE at 10 p.m. with our rebroadcast, and also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette on a new time on Friday night, 9 p.m. I'm Eric Asher. I'm your host of Inside New Orleans Sports. Also, Larry Holder of NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune Saints columnist is with us. We're coming right back to the phone lines, I promise. Stick around. We'll be right back. That's been the biggest problem.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Natal's Air Conditioning, our motto is service honoring the golden rule. We're dedicated to providing the best air conditioning solution for your home or business in the New Orleans metro area. More information is available at 504-821-0005. Natal's Air Conditioning, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. So happy to have Larry Holder of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune Saints columnist, with us tonight. As promised, we're going right back to the phone lines, 866-3200. Let's head to Isla in Terrytown. Isla, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Isla, welcome to the show. Are you with us?
How you doing?
How you doing? Welcome.
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're going to have to listen on the phone, not on the TV. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Saints, man, and I appreciate watching them. There's a lot of guys that they got rid of that I think they shouldn't have never got rid of. That they probably would have got a little farther than what they got now. But they're doing pretty good. But I'm kind of considered about the Cadell White. They got him back there in that backfield. He's too slow, and he can't keep up with them guys. They put somebody back there to keep up with them guys. They probably can whip some butt. I'm looking forward for them to whip Atlanta when they come home. Because, I've never been to a Saints game, but I can look forward to watching them on TV.
There you go. Well, I appreciate the phone call. Let me ask Larry. Larry, we talked a little bit about the lack of leadership on this team, especially on the defensive side, has affected this team this year.
Leadership, yes. Here's the thing. The Saints were going with the more talented guys, and that's why when I can rattle them off, and we'll look defensively, but look, they lost some offensive pieces as well, but you lose Will Smith, Jonathan Vilma, Jabari Greer, Roman Harper, Malcolm Jenkins, and then offensively, you lost Lance Moore, you lose Darren Sproles. Defensively, obviously, a lot of people were talking about that, and the caller just mentioned that. They were not up to snuff as far as on the field. Here's the thing. If Jabari Greer was healthy, he would still be on the team. But he's not, and that's why they unloaded him.
Yes.
But all the other players, they were going to be on their way out anyway. And so they were banking on, saw some success from all the guys that are on this team now. You saw it all last year. So you figured they're going to take a step up, play well in the Rob Ryan defense. Obviously that hadn't happened, and they internally, I'm telling you, they're wondering, why did this just happen? Why did this happen? And yet we point to Jabari Greer last year. I know we did in the first segment, and they were not the same after that. Did not have as many turnovers, but they didn't have as much of a pass rush. And this year you're not getting a pass rush, and that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. Not getting a pass rush, which lack of turnovers, lack of opportunities, lack of a shorter field because you're backing up the defense. Can't get off on third down. I think more vocally rather than on the field because, look, those guys, their time was up as far as – look, Roman Harper, he's not playing very well in Carolina. Malcolm Jenkins has been solid, even though he may have had some early interceptions. People wonder, oh, why you got rid of him? But, look, talent-wise, the Saints are better, and yet –
it was institutional knowledge more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Okay, the knowledge of the program, knowing to win, overcoming adversity, been through it before. And you haven't lost that on the offensive side of the ball, really, because you got Breeze and the offensive line is intact. You got a guy like Colston who's a quiet leader, but defensively it shows. I think it really shows the lack of having that guy, that vocal leader. So much so that Curtis Lofton, who's not really been a vocal guy, has become a vocal guy now, right?
Well, actually, he is a vocal guy just because, look, he's a middle linebacker, and but he's it. That's the problem. He is alone, essentially. You might see Junior Gillette holler and scream, and he's got the C on his jersey, and yet we already saw a couple weeks ago what he said about all the other players, and that was a situation where he wasn't prodded into saying that. Yeah. He was even given a chance to backtrack, and he jumped in further. So to me, it's like Curtis Lofton is alone, but you bring it up on offense. They've got all these different guys who they're still intact. Streiff, Grubbs, Jari Evans, Jonathan Goodwin's back, Colston, Breeze, Ben Watson, who hadn't been around, but he's been around Super Bowl teams.
Yes, he has.
Pierre Thomas, a veteran guy. So that's why that is more intact than the defensive side. I think it's obvious.
Hayward is in Hammond. Hayward, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. How you doing, Hayward?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Got a question. During the Super Bowl run, Sean Payton wasn't calling plays. Now Sean Payton has took over the ability of calling plays. To me,
Sean
I don't
Payton
think
was
it's
calling play. No, Sean Payton was the play caller during the Super Bowl run. He took a break from that when he hurt his leg.
After he broke his leg.
In 2011, Pete Carmichael was doing it. But Sean Payton was calling the plays in 2009. I can promise you that.
Okay. So why is not working now? Because to me, I think defenses know what they're going to play or what they're going, Breeze going to, when they're going to throw or when they're going to pass and what kind of run they're going to run. And when Breeze haven't had a very good year himself, and I know that Sean Payton doesn't get on him like he get on other players, and I'm going to hang up and I just want to know.
Thank you, Hayward. We don't see Sean Payton getting on Drew Brees. He talked about that the other day.
He gets on him in the headset and screams
right?
at him.
He's screaming at him there.
Right.
Have the Saints become too predictable?
I don't think so. I don't have a real problem with their play calling, but I could tell you, look, the offense, it's not the same unit that they're used to. And I wrote about this earlier this year, just when Breeze was really struggling, because believe it or not, Drew Brees, he has the 5th highest quarterback rating in the NFL right now. He's going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Absolutely.
And all the yardage, he's the only quarterback in the NFL with a 70% completion percentage, lots of touchdowns. So, look, he is playing, to me, at a Pro Bowl level. I think a lot of it has to do with the defense stinks, and he's pressing because he knows every little thing matters. And also, I think you look at Colston, he's not the same guy. Jimmy Graham, before the shoulder injury, was playing well, not as well as since he's having. I think that's still a problem for Jimmy Graham. And yet, you look at the receiving core, I think he's still trying to learn where those guys are going to be. He's played with Brandon Cooks for only a few games, and now he's out for the year. I think when Cooks got hurt, huge blow, because I think you were starting to see even Sean Payton as a play caller, maybe it goes to this, using both of those guys in multiple situations, running every route on the route tree, being very effective, and that's bringing Graham in, and that's bringing Colston back into the mix. I think losing Cooks, you lose that element that they were really starting to click with, but it took a while for them to click with Stills and Cooks and get that cohesion. But I think they started learning it. Cooks gets hurt. We see the offense take a little bit of a step back, but we don't see Drew Brees getting yelled at all the time, because without Drew Brees, they're totally sunk. Drew Brees keeps them in the games a lot of time, and I think Drew Brees is pressing because of the defense.
I would blame Drew Brees' struggles on two things this year. I think the oblique injury slowed him down early in the season. I think it was still a problem. I think he, again, despite Hank Goldberg's comments yesterday on the Rich Eisen show, that he said that Brees had an abdominal pull. I think he's in a little bit of a time warp. I think we saw Drew Brees against the Bears. He looked like he was in tip-top shape. But I will blame it a little bit on the offensive line. I think the offensive line has aged a little bit right before our very eyes. They've started to slow down a little bit. I don't know if it's a situation where one offensive lineman is trying to, much like we talked about earlier in terms of assignments, worried about the guy next to him and maybe trying to help each other a little bit more. But I think we've seen it consistently. I don't think that Goodwin is the same player he was in the beginning of the season because of the injury. And I think we've seen Grubbs and Evans slow down a bit. Your thoughts?
Well, Goodwin, it's almost painful to watch him at times. He's had so many injuries.
Oh, yes.
And think about this. When Tim Lelito started, they beat up Green Bay, and they beat up Carolina. So I've been saying that they were going to ever make a change, put in Lelito. They still feel like Goodwin gives them what they can do. But I think you're probably onto something to where maybe at times Evans or Grubbs may be compensating, and yet they're not the same all-pro players as we're used to. Teron Armstead has been okay at times, and at other times he looks like he's still learning. I still think he's a left tackle of the future. I think Zach Strief has been solid.
Yes.
But look, the offensive line has not been what it used to be as far as in pass protection, and yet they're running the football better than we've seen in multiple years, which you're wondering, how can they be doing this and not doing the other thing?
But I think that lends to my point. You know, often when you're in pass blocking, you need to use your feet. You have to get out a little bit more. Run blocking, it's man-to-man, unless you're going to do one of those sweeps that they do, which, again, we've seen Armstead kind of leading that with his athleticism. And again, I'm going to get into it a little bit later on the program. The problem is that offensive line Marcus Colston, Grubbs, and Evans, both of those guys, they cost you a lot of money next year, and you got to figure out what you're going to do going forward.
Oh, absolutely. And those are potential. I don't want to say all of them will be salary cap casualties because I can see them just being asked to take a pay cut and figure it out. But you're going to have to manage those. But yeah, all three of those guys, Pro Bowl caliber players, even though Colston never made one, which he should have at least made one at some point in his career. But look, they're all younger 30s. They're aging. They've had a lot of wear and tear, and you're seeing that on the field, and that's another reason why the offense has been struggling a little bit.
I would agree. To Algiers and Chris. Chris, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
All right, man. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
All right. Okay. Look, man, Saints always find a good free agent and develop, and that player become a star. I want y'all to comment on Pierre Warren.
Thank you, Chris. I really wanted to talk. This is one of the points I wanted to talk about. You were at training camp. Every time I talked to you or anybody else that was there, you guys told me Pierre Warren's all over the field, a ball hawk. Okay?
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to call him the second coming of Darren Sharper, but he was a guy that was all over the field. He gets cut. Okay, he goes on the practice squad. He's pulled up the practice squads, heads to Minnesota, where he was the active one game, and then they put him on their practice squad. The big question is, especially with the injury to Jarvis Byrd, how you let this guy go? The guy has been a ball hawk as he has come back. At one point, he's the best player on the field.
Right, and 2 interceptions, obviously played very well last week. And I don't know if I can't justify what the Saints did because I did a projected 53-man roster every week for Noel.com.
He was on the bubble, right?
I put him on.
Right.
I'd said, get out of here, Marcus Ball. They went the other route. Marcus Ball hasn't really panned out at all on defense or even on special teams. But look, at least the Saints were able to go back and get him. You got him just in time, and he's at least making a difference. But yeah, and I also think they felt good about where they were at safety with. You don't anticipate Jarvis Byrd and Raphael Bush going on IR.
Agreed.
Those are your 2 free safeties. Yeah, no problem with those 2 guys. So that's why they put him on the practice squad. It's not like they didn't like him, but they said, all right, we'll put him on a practice squad. And then, word gets out, Minnesota, this, that, and the other. But at least they were fortunate enough to go get him because you could have got him and it would have been too late. But you got him early enough. He's in and he's starting to feel his way out.
Yes, and it's almost a tale of the tape of this season and really the entire Peyton era. With the exception of 06 and 2013, where you've had multiple players, more than 2 players really make an impact from a draft. I mean, you go back and you look at the drafts, and I have. Most of you'll get 1 or 2 players that made it out of the 7 choices. You've got 18 undrafted free agents. Now, 19 undrafted free agents with Warren on this team that have made this impact. And in a lot of cases, it's kind of softened the blow of some bad drafts because you got these young guys that are coming in. You're not drafting them, but they're making impacts, like a Pierre Thomas, like a Pierre Warren.
Oh, absolutely. And we can go up and down the list. And every position group, we can go up and down the list. Well, think about this. I don't know how many Shontavious Jones you count him because he's on the roster. And he's another one.
Right, make it 20.
Right, exactly. And so they've obviously done a very good job of also developing those guys. And really, you got to give them credit because if there's a drafted guy they're not buying into, they'll go with the guy they like. We saw that long ago when it was Pierre Thomas versus Antonio Pittman, the guy they traded up for to get and dumped him before they started camp. But no, that's really saved them. And look, who is the second leading touchdown receiver on the Saints right now is undrafted rookie free agent from, 2 years ago? Josh Hill.
Right.
All he does is catch touchdowns.
Right, and not just that. You look at him, again, he's almost making Graham look like an expensive decoy at this point.
Oh, don't you start that, Eric. It's expensive decoy.
Okay, I mean, come on. He's been criticized for not showing up by fans. I get it all the time on my radio show. But, I mean, look, I'm not going to say Jimmy Graham is not worth the money. We'll see down the line. I think you need a little bit better, more body of work going forward. But he's not the same player when he gets injured. You can see that each and every season.
I definitely think, look, this shoulder injury, you could see, when it happened, you could see he couldn't lift up the arm. People like to call Jimmy Graham soft. I'm not calling him soft.
I'm not calling him soft.
Not with this injury because I feel like even this season, I felt like before the shoulder was bothering him,
Mm-hmm.
I felt he was actually one of the few players that actually improved. He was able to play better against the cornerback.
He was blocking better?
Blocking better, a little bit.
Yeah, a little, but he was better.
But he was able to shrug that chip off the line, get into open field. I thought he actually improved, but I really think that shoulder injury was a problem. I still think he's going to be worth the money. I'll tell you this, I'd rather have spent, if I'm the Saints fan or the Saints, I'd rather have spent, say, $10 million on Jimmy Graham than spend, let's say, $12 million on a Mike Wallace, somebody like that, or like an Eric Decker. I would rather have a Jimmy Graham with that price tag than like some of these other guys who borderline one wide receivers that aren't really borderline one wide receivers.
To Slidell and Tom. Tom, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom. Tom, you with us?
Hello?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing pretty good today. The question I got to ask you is about Breeze. Did anybody notice that Breeze had a different kind of game than he's ever had before? He's concentrating more on controlling the ball and protecting the ball. He loses the ball once every other week, you might say. I mean, he's one of the quarterbacks who's going to go in the Hall of Fame for sure. But he's always had that mentality like he can't be beat, and that's where his fumbles came in, where people come around, swing his arm around. He wasn't aware of it. The ball comes loose. But I find this last game, he was protecting the ball more, going down for the sack, and I was cheering. I was actually cheering to see that, because the older he gets, the more he's got to learn how to do that. And it's not going to take away from the big sixes that he throws. I think he can come back from that. That's him. But those unfocused moments, or those focused moments on getting the ball down the field and not protecting it, he's got to back off from.
Tom, thank you for the phone call. I think in the last few games, he's heard the little cat calls from the media and the fan base, and I think he's more focused. I don't think he's forcing the ball like he once did, where he was trying to go to a Jimmy Graham or way back when to a Sproles. I think he's spreading the ball around more, and I think he's cognizant of realizing that him as the leader of this team, when he fumbles the ball, when he turns the ball over with an interception, it's tough for this team to overcome.
I think especially in the Chicago game, he was more conscious of being a little more careful and not as risk-taking as he usually is.
Because of the conditions?
I think because of the conditions. And maybe even the early turnover, because you couldn't have that. And that's not on him,
No,
but
not at all.
but it did happen. And they couldn't get behind. Like, look, they 2 early turnovers in Carolina. They got away with it in Carolina. They did not get away with it at home against Carolina.
Yes.
But I feel like specifically in the Chicago game, I think he was more cognizant of that just because you knew what kind of game it was going to be. Conditions were suspect. He's warming up with the glove, taking the glove off. He didn't know if it was going to rain or what, so I think he was a little more aware of that. But here's the thing. I mean, Drew Brees is a risk taker. He's going to make the Hall of Fame as a risk taker. Wrote it earlier this year. Don't get on his case for taking risk when it's helped him so many times. He's essentially Brett Favre. You got to live with it sometimes, but he's done so many great things. And I think you're starting to see that. You saw that in Pittsburgh, and you saw that against Chicago.
To Metairie and Steve. Steve, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Steve.
Hey, guys. Great job. I think this is the most intelligent show on TV right now.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's because of the guest.
No, Eric's a pretty smart guy, too.
Well, both of y'all are great. Your previous problem touched on the question I had was, do you see the defensive line in particular get demoralized when Drew Brees throws these interceptions that just they make me turn off the TV, and I don't. It's got to affect these guys at some level as well. And since y'all just touched on that, the other question is: has there been any player for the Saints that got a huge contract that performed very well the next year? I can't think of anybody, and I'll listen to your responses. Great job.
Right. Thank you, Steve. Drew Brees?
Do I think
Drew Brees got the big deal? He the next year, it wasn't really a down year for Drew Brees.
No. Well, he went to 12, and that was obviously an unprecedented season.
Right.
But I'm trying to think if let's go back to. I'll go back. I'm not going in ancient history, but let's see. How did Deuce McAllister do after his huge contract?
Yeah, I thought he was fine.
Yeah, but let's see. Charles Grant fell off the map.
yeah,
Will
come on.
Smith never
Yeah,
lived up.
never lived up
There's
to
a
it.
lot of bad deals that have
Well,
happened.
but that's the MO of this team. They want to reward a player after they've done well. And again, that's kind of the problem they're in right now. They're in cap hell now because they basically have rewarded the Super Bowl players that were in the Super Bowl, and then they've utilized that money to try to turn their base salary into a signing bonus, and to be able to sign other players. Now that credit card comes due when you start looking at some of these players who are aging. So whereas Belichick will get rid of a player, the Saints tend to reward a player after they've done something well.
Sometimes, I feel like sometimes, I think, we just use the Charles Grant, Will Smith example. I think they did a terrible contract with Charles Grant a few years ago, like in 07, 08. So they had to pay Will Smith more than Charles Grant because he's a better player. So they got stuck there. But look, I think Jari Evans, when he got his big deal, I think he played well afterwards. Marcus Colston actually got a smaller deal than some of those big-time wide receivers in that cap era. Because that was the Drew Brees and the Carl Nicks and all this. So it's kind of hit or miss with that. But look, they've done the same scenario with the salary cap over and over again. They've been able to manage it. And yet, do you have some tough cuts and do you have to rework everything? But yes, but they do it every year. So it hasn't really hurt them terribly. They're going to have to make the same sort of – look, they did a lot of chopping last year.
They did.
They'll have to do it again, but it seems like they can manage it better than others.
Larry, this is the year where you're really going to see where the rubber hits the road on that. The first guy is going to be Drew Brees. He's got to renegotiate his deal. Before we go to our final caller, Saints take on Atlanta this weekend. We've already said we don't know what's going to happen. What are the keys to a Saints victory?
I think they need to start off fast. They don't start off fast at home anymore. It's kind of crazy, and I think that is certainly a key. You can't turn the football. I'm sounding like a coach,
That's
but
true.
But they turn the football over way too much. And to me, I just wrote it today. They were able to close out the first half with scores on the road. In the last 3 games, 3 touchdowns, won all of them. They've only done that at home twice this year. And they were only 1-1. They did it against Green Bay and did it against Baltimore. So I think you close out the first half with some momentum. They haven't had much momentum at all to speak of in the Dome.
Can't turn the ball over. Biggest thing to me is defensive line's got to get a pass rush.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think the Saints win another game if that defensive line doesn't mimic what they did in Chicago last week.
Well, especially with the secondary, with all the different pieces.
Exactly. And going against that Atlanta receiving core, and believe me, I know Julio Jones is not supposed to play. If he can walk, he'll probably be on the field on
All of
Sunday.
those guys are going to play.
You better believe it. Final call to Metairie and Hunter. Hunter, I got about a minute left, my friend. It's all yours.
All right, I'm going to go to the college bowls, and I want your comments if you have the time.
We have 1 minute.
I'm going to take Ohio State, even though they're a 9.5-point dog, because they're big. Those are some strong linemen. They're NFL caliber. And I'm going to take Notre Dame because Notre Dame beat Florida State, and I feel with the ACC officiating in that game was bad. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with that down here, but I wanted to say it, and I want you to bounce it off you guys and tell me why I'm wrong. Good evening.
Thank you,
and
Hunter.
happy holidays.
Same to you. Larry?
I can buy both of those. I don't trust LSU, and I think Alabama is certainly vulnerable. And look, I know Ohio State's going to be well represented fan-wise.
Oh, yeah, you better believe it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game.
It is going to be. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the physicality of that Alabama-Ohio State game. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the quarterback situation with LSU and Notre Dame. Larry Holder, thanks for being with us here on Inside New Orleans Sports. And thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this show each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. right here on WLAE. And now a new time on Pelican Sports Television on Friday nights. That's 9 p.m. Also, you can catch me on the radio weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on 990 a.m. WGSO. And remember, you can always listen live or download the podcast of my radio show at ericasher.com. And if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can catch those at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to Larry Holder, also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Jonathan Joseph, Kenny Juno, Amanda Lyons, and my director, William Hill. For Larry Holder, I'm Eric Asher. Merry Christmas to all, and we'll see you right back here for Inside New Orleans Sports next week. Thank you, and good evening.